Right, so the aftermath of the first real use by the police of the anti-protest bill was clear for all to see over the weekend. Just Stop Oil protesters standing silently with banners were arrested. Republic anti-monarchists were detained, their placards confiscated, despite having spent the previous 6 months liaising with the police about their intent to peacefully protest the coronation. 16 hours of detention they got, without charge, and had their phones confiscated at the end. The Westminster night safety team, who hand out rape alarms to people at night to keep them safe, they were arrested, and the alarms were confiscated in case they were later used to scare horses or be thrown to interfere with the procession. If you listen to the media today, I'll pick on Ed Balls here, who was speaking to Peter Tatchell on GMB, who updated the situation with the Republic protesters, still without their phones today, apparently, who compared their treatment by the Met Police to as if they were terrorists. Balls said Tatchell would be right if what he was saying was true, but said that he must be wrong. He has to be wrong, because surely the police had some intelligence. No, Ed, they didn't need any under this new legislation, and even if they did, Republic have no track record of being anything but peaceful protesters against the institution of a hereditary head of state. You also have no intelligence, sunshine. You're just making shit up on the fly to protect our institutions. Typical Red Tory that you are. Meanwhile, littering is a genuine crime, and the streets of London were left with a massive clean-up bill. I doubt Charles will be sent a £150 fine to clean up his mess after his party, though, eh? No fixed penalty notice for him. This was state-sanctioned suppression of peaceful protest. This has no place whatsoever in any country that considers itself fair and democratic, let alone this one that considers itself a civilized society, where the voices of the many are shut down to acquiesce to the desires of the wealthy and the powerful. The coronation cost £250 million. You might be interested to know that the government have chosen to fund it, in effect, because they've cut £250 million from social care workforce funding. As long as Charles enjoys his day, though, eh? But I want to focus on the legislation itself here, because it's proven to be seriously repressive stuff, and the protests against it getting passed should have garnered more attention than it did. People jeered and said, "You're scaremongering, there's a dead cat, but this isn't going to be what you say it is." And well, the cat is very much alive and kicking and got its claws out, hasn't it? Too many people in this country are sleepwalking continuously into even more repression. So you can imagine we would expect such oppressive laws to be challenged by opposition parties, so, representing us, wanting to run the country, wanting our votes after all, to say that we'll scrap this if we come to power. Very unlikely from Labour, unfortunately, if Wes Streeting's words on the Sunday morning rounds were anything to go by, saying it was all great accountability being shown by the Met. Absolute nauseating little right-wing lick-spittle that he is. Why were they arrested for peacefully protesting, Wes, and why do you like that so much? On the question of changing things, though, ultimate clarification came from Shadow Foreign Secretary and the biggest second jobber in the Labour Party, David Lammy, who on his LBC radio show, having taken a question from a member of the Republic organisation called Phil, who rang in and asked about repealing the public order bill that saw protest effectively outlawed and whether Labour would do that repeal, Lammy basically said, no, Labour won't do it. Lammy agreed on his show that the legislation was unnecessary, but went on to say, this repeal question comes up a lot in politics. We can't come into office picking through all the Conservative legislation, repealing. It would take up so much parliamentary time. We need a positive agenda. The primary thing is cost of living, inflation, and getting growth back into this country. Keir Starmer has been right to prioritise it. In other words, you can't be asked to undo the damage, can you? You're just going to leave it there to carry on damaging the country. It really is the height of arrogance that Labour think they can get elected and not change anything, isn't it? They still think they can win power just by wearing a different coloured rosette. Let's take on Lammy's points there a moment, though. Growth is finite for a start, Dave, and unless you spend more, that won't happen. And spend to invest, that is. Put more money in ordinary people's pockets, wage rises and the like, because that's what grows the economy, benefits the economy and boosts it, effectively ignoring what that bloated pimple at the Bank of England said the other day, that we need to stop asking for pay rises, because the economy is supposed to work in our interests, after all, is it not? Not the other way around. We don't work to grow an economy. The economy is supposed to be there to pay for the things we all need in our lives and benefit us. What an absolute bloviating farce of a man that was at the Bank of England. But also, in order to get inflation down, you need more inflation control. And inflation is controlled by taxation. So will you be the ones to tax the rich, Labour? Not a flaming hope when you're so desperate for donors. So genuinely, legitimately, even if Keir Starmer comes to power expecting more cuts, more income repression, more of exactly what we're living through right now under the Tories, because he wouldn't do things any differently. He doesn't run his party any differently, and his party isn't getting funded any differently. If you run your party like the Tories, if you take donations from the rich like the Tories, you have no choice but to run things exactly like the Tories, and Labour is admitting it. But to get to this point and say the one thing you could actually change, that you could actually control, removing appalling, abhorrent legislation that removes our rights to freedom of speech and freedom of expression because you don't think you'll have time, because you don't want to bother, because you want to focus on positive stuff. Is this not a positive move for the people of this country in restoring their rights to simply stand at the roadside, hold a sign up and object peacefully to something? Lammy might not be arsed. Perhaps if you gave up your second job and focused on the one you were elected to, you'd have time to do this. The fact is, though, it's not about being arsed or not. Labour peers in the Lords ended up letting this legislation pass their stage of the bill, so it headed back to the Commons for third reading, and the Tory majority saw it rubber-stamped, one sausage-fingered signature later, and it was law. Well, Starmerites are rowing back on what the idiot Lammy has said. Actions speak louder than words. It could have been blocked at Lord's stage. Labour let it through. They have no intention of repealing it, and anyone who has followed my numerous videos exposing the mile-wide authoritarian streak Starmer has won't be surprised at all at that. The entire point of changing government is to change how the country is run because we don't like things as they are. Starmer's Labour is so much like the actual Tories now, they won't even do that, won't even contemplate undoing any of the Tories' work before them, and in fact, by making all the same noises they have about growth and economic competence, they'll fail in exactly the same way. When a workforce fails, you make changes to the workforce. This is about changing the managers instead here, from one idiot with no idea what they're doing to another just as stupid. Other opposition parties have, of course, laid into Lammy over this. The SNP MP David Linden asked what other pieces of Conservative legislation will Labour refuse to repeal in government. Green Party MP Caroline Lucas tweeted out, "What the fuck? Why not? Fundamental rights now under attack by both parties." And Ed Davey, leader of the Lib Dems, he raised an eyebrow at West Streeting, repeating much of this nonsense at the weekend. Lammy's excuse for not doing anything here is that it would take up too much parliamentary time to repeal the anti-protest law, so it'll take up too much time to repeal anything else the Tories might choose to ram through between now and the next general election too, and of course anything else impacting on our lives that the Tories have strengthened or upheld. The basic message from Labour here is we have more important things to do than reverse what the Tories have done to you. To which the only answer you can give to that is, no, you absolutely bloody don't. Undoing their damage should be a priority, not something to be casually dismissed as if it doesn't matter to us. Universal credit sanctions, the voter ID laws that have stopped somebody casting their ballot, their right to vote, the even more extremist anti-trade union legislation, amongst which Blair made no effort to ever repeal either. Warning shot to the trade unions funding Labour again here. David Lammy, West Streeting, they basically told you all there's no point in voting Labour if you want anything to change from how the Tories are doing things. So are you still going to go out and vote Labour? And if you are, does that not technically now make you a Tory as well? Thanks for watching. If you appreciated this video, please do hit like and subscribe, leave a comment and hit the notification bell too, so you don't miss the next one. Also look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff by clicking on the Linktree link in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.